This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 358, a project browser update. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Today we're talking about the project browser with Leslie Glynn and Tim Plunkett. Leslie has been part of the Drupal community since 2011. She is on the organizing teams for Design for Drupal Boston and NetCamp. She has volunteered at many DrupalCons, Drupal camps, and contribution events since joining the community. Leslie received the Aaron Winborn Award in 2019 and was elected to the Drupal Association Board of Directors, serving as an at-large director from 2019 to 2021. She currently leads the customer success team at Redfin Solutions in Portland, Maine, and co-leads the Project Browser initiative with Chris Wells. Welcome back to the show, Leslie.
Thank you, Nick.
Also joining us is Tim. Tim has been a Drupal developer for over 14 years. Major contributions include helping get views into core, as well as the introduction of config entities, plugins, and the object-oriented form system. Most recently, he was the co-initiative lead and primary developer of Layout Builder. He works remotely from Philadelphia as an engineering manager in Acquia's Drupal acceleration team. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Glad to be here.
I'm Nick Laughlin. Today, my co-hosts are, as usual, John Picozzi.
Hello, everyone.
And joining us for the third week is Ryan Price.
It's good to be here.
We have another drop-in this week for the New England Drupal Camp. Sessions are open. If you would like to speak at the New England Drupal Camp, we welcome first-time speakers. And if you want to hear a little bit more, you can listen to this message from Stephen.
The New England Drupal Camp is back in person at Rhode Island College in November. NetCamp, as we call it, is a 2-day Drupal camp, Friday being a training day and Saturday sessions. Session submissions are now open. New presenters are encouraged and welcome. Did you know Nick and John are camp founders and are still on the organizing team? Join John and Nick and the other New England Drupalers in November. You can learn more. Visit nedcamp.org.
Thank you, Stephen. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing everybody again at the Drupal camp in New England. It's been, 3 years since we've all been together. So it'll be definitely it'll be a nice reunion, I think. We also have a module of the week this week. The module of the week is Search API Algolia or Algolia. I am really not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that company. I've heard it pronounced both ways.
It's Algolia.
Algolia?
Yep.
It's good to know. I've never been sure. So the Search API Algolia module is a submodule for the Search API that basically does feeds the information from your site into Algolia and then allows you to retrieve that information as well. So it's just like any of the other Search API integration modules like Solar or Database. It just is the go-between between your Drupal site and the Algolia service.
So Nick, here's a question for you because you may have used it more recently than I did. When I used it, it was simply an indexing module that allowed your site to be allowed your site data to be pushed into Algolia, and then you had to build a front end to pull that data out of Algolia and use it. Is that still the case?
My understanding as well, John. I'm using it on a project right now, and we are building a React app, which I think we used one of the starter kits that Algolia provides.
Yep.
Algolia, interesting product, especially if you're doing something like a commerce application or you have someone that maybe sort of has like a dedicated marketing team and they're really into things like A/B testing or, getting like analytics around their search, like what people are clicking on, like what, colors of, products are being clicked on more. This is not a commercial for Algolia, but it's a product that comes up often when we're discussing search options, and I think their cheap plans are fairly cheap, but their expensive plans they can get pricey quick.
Yeah, that was the reason I asked, is because I'd used it in the same use case where we were sending the data to Algolia and then using React to kind of use it it was a doctor finder for a health institution. So they were using it to kind of reactify the front end, which worked really good. It was super fast. Again, not a commercial, but another really good search utility if anybody's interested.
Yeah, I think Ryan's correct. I mean, I think you can get some basic information back from it without integrating directly, but if you want to use the full features, then you definitely need to write your own retrieval API system. But as far as getting the information in there, the module works exactly like you'd expect. You can configure your search API facets, and it'll parse that up and send it into the Algolia system.
And that's a super nice part about Algolia is it just provides that API for you to kind of interact with. That's part of the great service. So,
and I'll just add, if you're going to like a static site model, this is one of the more popular choices. I think that's a lot of times when it comes up to.
True story.
Also, there's a huge improvement with the new Search API system, I think, that I used with this module in particular, in that you can now easily create like one index, and you can use config management to just point at whatever database, whatever endpoint you want to. So you can have your one index, and then when you're on dev, it throws it to a dev instance on Algolia, and when you're in prod, it throws it to a prod one, and it just your config split management kind of just handles that works.
Interesting. So it's not it's transparent to the user. It's just kind of doing it when you import the config. Interesting.
Yep. Okay, moving on to our main topic of the week. Leslie, let's start with the easy question. Can you give us a quick overview of what Project Browser is?
Sure, absolutely. So Project Browser was announced by Dries at DrupalCon North America in 2021. The focus was on the site builder experience, and the idea was to have a project browser that makes it easier for site builders and those new to Drupal to find and install modules. Dries spoke about it again at DrupalCon Portland this year, where he's talking about Drupal for ambitious site builders. And the idea was to allow people to discover modules from within Drupal, from within their Drupal website, without having to go out to Drupal.org and to install those modules with a click of a button. So really, it's just, it's pretty easy to install Drupal, but then what? Then what do you do to add functionality to your website? Yeah. So that's what the idea of Project Browser is.
And Tim, how are you involved in the Project Browser initiative?
So currently I'm kind of functioning as one of the committers. So I'm reviewing and merging in actual code from the contributors from the community, and doing a little bit of development when I can, but mostly just, serving as an advisory capacity to Chris and Leslie as a previous initiative lead, and kind of trying to keep the issue queue moving.
Very cool.
Awesome. So at DrupalCon this year in Portland, I was able to work a little bit with Chris and Leslie and some other folks on Project Browser, which was awesome. And right now it's in the contrib space, right? You can install it on your site and play around with it if you want. But I was wondering if Leslie could kind of give us an idea of what's new with Project Browser and the initiative right now.
Oh, there's quite a bit of progress that has been made by the community. A lot of contributions have been made. Tim and his team have really helped out a lot. So there is now a beta release of the Project Browser in contrib space, which is great. That was as of a couple of weeks ago. So people can go on, install it, check it out, and give us feedback on what they think is good. So right now, what it allows you to do is from within your Drupal site, it allows you to, when you go to extend to look at the modules, there's now a new browse option there where you can browse, and much easier than the Drupal.org filter page. It's pretty simple. The default filters are just find me modules that are secure and that are maintained. and that's the default. So it finds the most popular ones, and that's the default sort. And you can then add additional filters, like, which categories you're looking for a module. You're looking for SEO modules or something like that. You can also do a full text search, searching for the module names. And then there's advanced filters beyond that as well. So basically, it gives you a card view or a list view, with just high level data, the logo, a description, and the categories. So card or list view of the different modules, you can then click on those cards to get more information about the module. And that's something we're working on right now, is that detail page.
So that's like, go ahead.
I was going to say, I hate to contradict you, but I committed the detail page just a couple days ago. So as of now, it's finished, in the sense of that when you click on it, instead of redirecting you to Drupal.org, it now pops open a full width-length page with all the details of the module.
Absolutely. And that is absolutely correct. What I was referring to is we're looking for feedback on that page to see because I lead the Site Builder subcommittee. So really, from a end user perspective, our main audience, those new to Drupal and site builders, giving them a chance to look at that, which is great. That's why we have the beta released. Tim's team has done a great job getting that out there. But now, is that helpful? Is there additional information that's needed? So that's kind of where we stand with that. But thanks for correcting me on that, Tim.
No, yeah, I mean, it's funny because I don't even know that that's in the beta. We might need to release a beta 2. Maybe we should do that in advance of this podcast being released. We'll have to talk to Chris about that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Talk to the boss.
It's happening live, folks.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I, like many of us, I would imagine, I have a kind of like a demo Drupal 9 instance, environment on my laptop, right? And the other day I spun it up for something and noticed it was like woefully out of date. So I went through and updated everything, very heavy-handedly, just did it, right? And one of the things that got updated was Project Browser, and I was like, oh, Project Browser was in here. I forgot that I was using this, at DrupalCon. So I went in and I kind of looked at the UI and like how it was working, and I was like, oh, I'm like, this is cool. And I'm like looking at like different things and icons on the cards and stuff, which brings me to a question, Leslie. Project Browser seems like it requires kind of people of all sorts of skill sets, right? So like, obviously you need backend developers to develop the code. You need UX folks to kind of look at how the front end is working and like maybe make suggestions there, solution architects to architect structured data structure and stuff like that. So do you guys have kind of all of those people that are helping out, or is there a need for certain types of people on within the initiative?
So yes, we have all kinds of people that are helping out, including the skill sets you mentioned. We also have a lot of designers helping out in terms of creating logos. We have documentation folks and testers helping out on, as I said, on testing the beta release, to give feedback as to anything that, any issues they have or anything they think could be improved. But yes, I think we're going to talk about how folks can get involved. So we'll get into this a little bit more at that point in terms of exactly what folks can do. But we're looking for people brand new to Drupal, getting somebody's feedback. I installed Drupal, and can I use the project browser to extend my site? That type of feedback is super helpful. So if you are interested in contributing, have never contributed before, regardless of skill set, reach out to us.
I think it's interesting too that you mentioned the default sort is, is it secure? Are the modules secure? And I think one of the really interesting things about that is I'd love for that to become one of the criteria for selecting modules. I mean, in my book, is it covered by the security advisory? If you have 2 modules that do similar things and one of them is covered and one of them isn't, I mean, that generally will tip the balance that way. I mean, that's really a powerful indicator. Like, I should use this module, it's covered by the security advisory. But the truth is, in Drupal 8, Drupal 9, especially recently, more and more modules, it seems, just sit in alphas or betas forever. So they're just not covered by the security advisory. So it's definitely a factor when I'm adding modules, and I try to keep, beta or alpha to a minimum. But sometimes you can't build the site without using some of these modules. And some of these modules are very stable, been in the community forever, for years and years. They just never got out of beta or RC. If you're in the commerce ecosystem, then it'll be RC 32 or something. But and those aren't covered by the security advisor, which makes sense. The security team does a great job, but they can only cover so much. But if we start getting to a point where people are using project browsers, their primary way of finding stuff, and that's filtering stuff based on that criteria, that might be a good carrot, trying to get people to get to full releases, so they'll be covered.
I think that's one of my favorite things. Sorry, I think that's one of my favorite things about this initiative is that the amount of change it's driving within the community, and will drive the more it gets adopted, is pretty dramatic. I mean, as Leslie mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of people working on improving the actual data itself, like the logos and whatnot and the descriptions. But that's going to be the quality of a Drupal module's presentation on its module page will need to improve. And people are going to be kind of motivated to do that, to keep up with the other modules that are doing it. And I do think the default filter of being covered by the security policy will be a motivating factor. So I think it's a great side effect of this initiative.
Yeah, I just want to, I don't know, I guess if Tim's seconding, then I'm going to be the one who says, can we add that to the permanent agenda for all future meetings in the Robert's Rules of Order? Is how many modules have converted to security team coverage recently? It should be going up, hopefully, at a fixed rapid pace as the project browser gets adopted. It's, in my personal opinion, a huge problem. So, Tim, in your intro, we heard the words the Drupal acceleration team. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and what's your job like every day?
Well, so the Drupal acceleration team is a team of engineers and within Acquia. It's been around in one form or another since 2011. It started as the office of the CTO, and Angie Webchick-Byron was the first hire, and kind of led that team for a long time. And in about 2018 or so, we kind of reformulated into what's now the Drupal acceleration team. And we work on many different things. Our mission is to add the mission is written as we add momentum, planning, and organization to Drupal core efforts. We have several core maintainers on the team, XJM being one of the more prominent in that she has been kind of revolutionized the core maintenance and governance process. That's why we have 6 months releases, 6 month releases of core. That's why we have security windows at the same time every month. That's dependable. Those are all initiatives and things that our team contributed to. But on the code side, I'll link to a post, or I'll submit a link to a post about some of the many things we've done over the years. But more recently, JSON API, Big Pipe, settings tray, layout builder. Those are things we've been working on right now. Automatic updates is a big module a big core initiative to have your site automatically update itself and all your modules, which is the #1 most requested feature of Drupal. So that's the thing that our team is contributing to. Everything we work on is done obviously with dozens, hundreds of volunteers as well. So I don't think we can claim any one thing as all ours. But yeah, it's a I think almost 20-person team, and
oh wow,
yeah, it's I think we're the largest and most tenured team in engineering at Acquia. And so I'm one of the 2 engineering managers. And yeah, so there are currently 3 engineers allocated full time to work on Project Browser.
That's awesome.
Oh, wow. That's significant.
Yeah. Narendra, Shrishti, and Ben are all there. You can find them in the issue queues. They're there every day working on 3 different, right now they're focused on 3 different things. The detail page, which we just landed, sort of the allowing you to have multiple sources of these modules, which I can talk about in a second. And then the final thing is integrating with auto updates so that from the UI, you can click a button and it'll perform the composer require for you instead of, requiring you right now to go and run terminal commands yourself. So those are the 3 things my team specifically is focused on, for the contrib module. And then eventually we'll transition to trying to get it into core, which is a whole nother ballgame.
But you have experience with that too, which is another one of those valuable.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of the reason I'm here on this team is because I do have that layout builder was written as a contrib module and then put into core, and it took about a year to write it, and it took about a year to put it in core. It's equivalent effort.
So speaking about that, I guess the next question is, will Project Browser be in Drupal 10 core, or do you think it's more realistic that it'll be in Drupal 11 or sometime in the future?
Well, I mean, I think anyone who says they know when Drupal 11 comes out is making it up. I mean, the core semantic versioning system kind of, we're at the mercy of PHP, we're at the mercy of our upstream dependencies like Symfony, and there are plans, but there's Drupal 10.1, Drupal 10.2, Drupal 10.3. Those are potential releases that Project Browser could be included in. I think there's a strong possibility for 10.2, for example, would be a great one, and that would be December next year, 2023.
Do you think that there's still that much work to do for Project Browser to get it into core?
No, I think yeah, I mean, so the standards of core development are extremely rigorous. The different gate system, so accessibility, usability, security, scalability, etc., translatability. Like there are a lot of wrinkles there, and there's a lot of work to be done. I think the biggest, not problem, but challenge we face is that I don't know if this has been mentioned before, that Project Browser is a Svelte app, Svelte.js. It would be the first piece of code added to core that uses a JS framework that, well, I guess if you count underscore, backbone, whatever, from the D7, D8 days, but the first modern JavaScript app included as part of core. There's a lot of governance and infrastructure and process questions around how do we keep that code updated, how do we prevent Svelte itself from if they have new releases, how do we stay up to date with that, etc. So there are a lot of question marks there, and that was a risk we took. We could have written it in vanilla JavaScript by hand, would have taken a lot longer, but we wouldn't have had these sort of other future problems. So it was a risk we took to help modernize Drupal. In that way, as I said before, with the community side and the module data side, Project Browser is really pushing the envelope in a lot of different ways with Drupal. Yeah. So I think that's going to contribute to the lengthy process of including it into core.
Leslie, is this something you're considering at this point at all, or are you just trying to get feature complete and you'll worry about core later?
Well, I think the team is working on the contrib space right now. Eventually, it will get into core after it passes all the gates. And so the goal is to have it in core, obviously, but we're going to start off with the contrib space because, there's less blockers, less friction to get it involved in that space. I think a big thing that we need to work on is the data itself, the data on Drupal.org. So we can have a great application, but if it returns you non-usable data, then it's not going to be useful. And we want this Project Browser to be useful, like I said, to site builders and those new to Drupal. So what we're working on right now from my side of the team, I know Tim and his team and Chris, they're all doing great things in terms of code and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the data, the Drupal.org data, the cards that I mentioned that are results of when you go to, browse for modules, the beta version, the three things that are displayed are the title, the logo, a short description, and categories. So the logo, I would say the majority of the modules, and we're talking about modules right now. It's called Project Browser, but initially we're dealing with modules. We're not dealing with themes or distributions or anything like that right now. So the logo is important. So we need designers to help us just design the logos, and they have to be a certain size and all that kind of stuff. So there's specs that they need to meet.
Yeah.
Now then the description is the most important piece. We want to have something that's 200 characters or less that's not technical. So right now, if you go and look at Drupal.org and look at the descriptions, you start reading the project page, the detail page, a lot of them are very, very technical because they're written, the maintainers are typically, more, I don't want to say back-end coders, but they're developers, correct. So we have people that are maybe not in that space that are trying to come up with non-technical descriptions so that those cards that you see will basically tell you what that module does in a very easy to understand terms. And then the categories, right now, there are a lot of categories. Some modules are tagged with up to, I think it's 37 categories, because they want their module to always show up whenever people search for it. So we're trying to figure out the top 1 to 3 categories that a module should fit into, so that it's so the results that you're getting back from the project browser are meaningful to someone trying to use it. So data is critical to this whole process, and that's what the Site Builder Subcommittee is kind of working on. And I can tell you later on in the show how you can actually contribute and help us out with that.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was helping out with at DrupalCon when working with the project browser team, was just looking through the current list of categories and the proposed new list of categories and making sure that they make sense, because at the end of the day, like, we have a really robust developer community, and we have a lot of different categories that have been put in a list, but sometimes they don't always make sense to like the average site builder like me. I think that's a interesting part of this initiative as well, is reorganizing the data and getting the data into a more usable format for the end user. Not that it's wildly unusable now, but sometimes you select a category expecting one thing and you get another. So I think that's definitely a valuable focus, side effect. I don't necessarily know what the appropriate term there is, but it's valuable nonetheless.
Right. So currently we're working on, we started looking at what you're talking about, redoing the categories, but that's a really huge, really big endeavor. We've decided for now is to use the existing categories and just select the top 3 out of those existing categories. The next phase will be redoing the categories and eliminating a few that are no longer needed, that are old, combining some, adding some new ones. So that is still in our mind, but it's not MVP. It's a little bit downstream.
It's an interesting idea too, because like if you force people to select 3, you may find naturally that there are categories that are not used or not needed because somebody's like, oh, well, now I can't select a number of them, right?
Right. They can still select more than 3. We're going to display the top 3 on the card, and then there'll be a link to more, so you can technically have more. But we're trying to, encourage folks to really think hard about what categories they use versus just, I want my module to always appear, so I'll just pick them all.
Cool. Is there I was trying to look at the interface, and I pulled it up on a Simply Test Me. It's not showing me, so I'm going to just ask, is there a place in the project browser when you're looking around that shows off the people that work on the module and maybe how they're supported, like some of the information that's available on Drupal.org right now?
So that does appear in the project detail page, where if you click through on a thing, there's no room on it for a card. There's no room on the card for that information, if you know what I mean.
So it's just like a little card, and you kind of have to click through to find out more.
Right. It's about, I think, 3 per row, like modern card-based design. It follows the Claro design system. So it's a couple hundred pixels wide, a couple hundred pixels tall. And so, when you click through, it gives you, the idea is to replicate all the information that's on D.O so that you don't have to leave your Drupal site in order to build your Drupal site.
Yeah. Something that's been, near and dear to my heart recently is, as GitHub added their like funding button, and, now Composer and NPM and other things will advertise to you like, hey, some of these projects are looking for support. It's interesting to me to see like how that might fit into the Drupal community as well.
Yeah, I mean, there have been advances in that on Drupal.org. There are official places now you can list that an organization is supporting you as the maintainer, that you are the contributor in this way. And I think that there's a balance between what improvements are made on Drupal.org itself, the source of the canonical data, and what we display. And right now we're just trying to display everything they have in a reasonable way. But as this progresses, there is a lot. There's a lot of collaboration between the DA and our team. They're working on a new JSON API endpoint for us to use. That's going to be built on Drupal 9 because Drupal.org is currently on Drupal 7. So there are these improvements that are being made, and so we talk often. They're in the channel, and so we're collaborating very closely on this.
So earlier you mentioned the automatic updates initiative as well, which is kind of the number one request for Drupal features. And you mentioned that ideally there's an easy way with the project browser to update existing modules. But I'm curious a little bit if you can go a little bit deeper into how the two initiatives are working together. And I'm interested in both of your perspectives. Tim, on the kind of development side, Drupal acceleration team side, do you have the same engineers on them? And then, Leslie, I've got kind of a similar question for you after.
Sure. So yeah, there's a team on the Drupal acceleration team working with the rest of the community on the auto updates initiative. And, the underlying work there is actually, it's very interesting. I can link to that as well. The update framework is a Google Open Computing something initiative across all languages to provide, a spec for how best to update code. And the PHP implementation of this is being worked on by, our engineers along with others.
Okay.
And so then auto updates is, conforming to that spec and using the library, that API. So they're working both on Drupal and on GitHub to make this happen. Then within auto updates itself, there's a submodule called Package Manager, and that's really the driving code that allows you to, effectively use a PHP API around Composer to Composer require, Composer update. And so auto updates itself will use its own code from that submodule, and then the project browser will have a dependency, an optional dependency, etc. We don't know yet. We're still working on the details there to allow you to, if you have that module enabled, it will enhance project browser to make that. Right now, the download button pops up a modal with some instructions. If you have this installed, instead, it'll actually just go and do it for you. Composer require the correct contrib module and all its dependencies. The biggest thing that the Drupal acceleration team is working on right now is all the validators and all the validation that's needed. So if you try to Composer require a contrib module that requires a higher version of Drupal core than you're currently running, it should not update your entire Drupal site to a new version of core. That would be kind of cool, but definitely not what people are expecting when they click that button. So there's a lot of guardrails that need to be put in place to ensure that weird things aren't going to happen to your site when you click this button. And that's where the majority of the effort is being put right now.
So I have a use case question, and this may be a rabbit hole, but we'll go down it momentarily, I think. So say I want to use Project Browser on my site, but I don't want to use automatic updates. Like I don't want my site automatically updated, but I want to be able to click the button in Project Browser and have it install the update. Is that like something that you guys are considering, or is that like kind of like a deal breaker?
The Package Manager submodule of auto updates works independently of auto updates. So we have a dependency on that specifically, not on auto updates itself. Now, even then, there's, auto updates just had their first contrib stable release. Congratulations to them. There's two different ways that you can run auto updates. One is just a button in the UI that you go and push when you feel like it to update your site, which is not really auto at all, but it's a GUI based version of doing all the Composer work. And then there's the normal thing you expect of like cron runs it in the background. So even if you wanted to have a giant button that you can push to update your site, you don't have to have the cron part run. And if you don't want any of that, you can still have the functionality built into Project Browser.
Okay.
Awesome.
And so, Leslie, as one of the co-leads for Project Browser, I'm just curious what level of collaboration you have with auto updates team. Like, are you in their channels too? Or are you having monthly, quarterly meetings with them? Like, how are you having to coordinate with them at all?
So I would say, because I'm co-lead, but I'm more on the site builder subcommittee side, I really don't worry too much about that technical. What I worry about is that the somebody going to use Project Browser will have the ability right now to get the instructions to download
Okay.
and install it. It says basically what's going to happen. Eventually, those buttons will work automatically, as Tim said. But the technical engineering details behind that, Chris, I think, is having meetings with Tim and having meetings with Ted Bowman and the auto update team. I've
Okay.
spoken to Ted about it, but I haven't got into any great technical details about that, because that's not really on the side that I'm trying to focus on right now.
What are some things that have changed about the way the project is run and managed since it started? Obviously, you talked about the committee that you're on, making sure that this user experience is good. So, what are some of the things that have been added or changed over time?
So I would say when we first started, the key thing was there was two people involved, Ron Northcutt and Matt Grasman, and they spun up a real quick prototype. I think Matt had the prototype during our first call with Reese when we were just talking about the initiative. I think Matt was sitting there working on a prototype. So, the idea, getting things rolling. There were folks involved at that time. They've now stepped away. They periodically check in, but they're doing other things. And Tim's acceleration team has come on to really help Chris and all the other community volunteers to move things along more quickly. Tim, you have anything to add to that?
No, I'll agree that the code base is entirely based off of Matthew Grasmick's like weekend hacking. I think we may have changed every single line since then, but it's definitely the same repo.
So I guess
cool.
that's one of the questions I have, Tim. Then you mentioned that you have kind of 3 engineers working on this pretty much full time, and that your job, aside from coordinating, is managing the commits. I'm curious, how much work is that? Or do you find you're managing releases for Project Browser every week, or merging stuff every day? Or
Yeah, well, so you're absolutely right that we do have 3 engineers from my team fully allocated to this. But I want to say there's at least a dozen extremely active contributors that those 3 are 3 of. So there's at least 9 other people that have no affiliation with my team in any way that are working on this, some on a daily basis. So we're even if that a small chunk of the team, but because for my team it's their day job, they have a lot more time to put towards it. I came up through the volunteer contribution side, like working dozens and dozens of hours getting views in core in my free time. But it is a different sort of flow when that's your 9 to 5. And so I manage as I said, Drupal acceleration team is 20 people. We have 4 different initiatives running at any given point. There's we're across all different time zones. There's 6 different time zones, in like 5 different countries or something. And so there's a lot of other things that do take up people's time around here. But it is a big focus of mine, and it's my current biggest touch point with the community. So I'm still involved with Layout Builder, but it doesn't have the momentum that Project Browser does, for sure. So I'd say the first thing I do every day is check the issue queue and see if there's anything being done. With 2 of the members of my team being based in India, and there's a couple other volunteers from companies in India. There's round the clock work being done.
Very cool.
Which is always fun.
So my next question kind of goes back to an earlier theme, and it's about security. Obviously, where the Drupal community, one of the things that it definitely gets a gold star on is the existence and the robustness of its security team. This module, though, since it's pulling down outside code, I kind of mentally put it in a class of modules like Devel or Coder used to be, where it's just a little bit, because just by the nature of what it does, it's just a higher risk module, right? Than something that's just interacting with the form API. So how are you managing security considerations around this and making sure that ensuring that it's secure to have on sites?
Yeah, sorry, I if my laugh came on the recording, it's because you mentioned the form API, and I feel like as a form API maintainer, most of my security concerns lie over there. In its current state, as of the beta and as of actually even the dev version we have out today, there's no security concerns at all because it doesn't do anything. It is a browser of things, and the most action you get is you click the link, it opens a modal with a composer require string that you copy paste and run yourself. So there's no data stored, officially there isn't. We're currently cheating, waiting for D.O to be updated to actually let us have a JSON endpoint. But like there's no user configurations stored. There's no data being written. We have no APIs to do that. As soon as we start to integrate auto updates, package manager code, that's when things start to get scary. But we're just using their APIs. So all the security concerns and risks are kind of on their shoulders. But even as I mentioned earlier, to John's point, like you don't have to enable that module. Project Browser, it will be optional. When you say
their shoulders, do you mean the team managing the package module, or do you mean like Composer or both?
Sorry. Well, yeah. I mean, whenever you take on a dependency, you then trust that entire software team to do their job. And I mean, that's a big part of the Drupal cycle. We have so many different upstream dependencies that we have to mitigate. And if you stalk the security releases often enough, you see most of them are upstream code. So yes, you have to trust Composer if you want to use the one-click feature. You have to trust our integration with Composer if you want to use that feature. But at its stripped down bare bones, it's only just displaying information, and you don't have to use those more scary, risky features.
So I just want to clarify for our listeners, I'm not trying to fearmonger against this module. It's just something that I was curious about because, once this is integrated with the package manager, you'll be, running kind of install commands. But as you mentioned, these are commands that you're running right now. So you already implicitly trust Composer. You need to do your due diligence there. But as long as you're trusting that Composer command, it sounds like it's just an automated way to run that. And as of right now, it's a read-only thing, so there's no risk there.
Absolutely.
And while we're talking about security, one thing I think I heard you say, Tim, earlier was there'd be a way to connect to sort of like say other endpoints. If I have like a private institutional package directory, something like that.
Yeah, so I previous to working at Api, I worked at Stanford Graduate School of Business, and so they have their sort of curated list, and many orgs do this too. But Stanford, because I work there, is the one I always point to, and so we want to allow anyone to provide what we call it's a source plugin, so an alternate source. It could be pointed to your private GitHub repos that your org maintains, or just a cool list of modules that you like, where you only want people to install these ones, and you don't want to have the argument about paragraph layouts versus blocks versus whatever, and you just like lock it down that way. The way we currently implement it is that we have a single plugin that ships with Project Browser that points to D.O. It reads from Drupal.org, and so that's the canonical one. And right now, you can only have one of those at any given time. And so that's one of the big things that my team's working on. And there's some design needs there too, to allow you to have multiple different sources enabled at the same time, and what that would look like, and how that would, how it would benefit a site builder. But that's a big focus for us at this moment.
But so if I were to do this today, there's I guess some sort of a server that I'd have to set up, but then there would also be like a module that I have to install alongside Project Browser that would, take over that plugin.
Right now, you provide your own plugin, just like any other plugin part of Drupal, where you write your own plugin and it reads from somewhere. From a programming standpoint, there's an interface that you have to comply to and implement, and then you have to dictate, what the list is. And I mean, the real end of it is that anyone can provide on the Composer side. You can provide your own repo, like packages facade. So Drupal.org has its own that maps all the different modules to all the different, their own GitLab instance. Anyone can do that right now with Composer. So this is just yet another, way to kind of represent a Composer concept in the UI. Okay. So in the same way that however you're getting these modules onto your sites currently, you would basically be doing the same exact thing. The interesting thing is, though, you don't have to be the owner of such a thing. Like, you can always just come up with your own list of modules, and just as long as they are Composer requirable, right? As long as they have a packages listing somewhere, you can have them all on the list together. So it's a nice way to provide some curation, and customization there. And also just, showing off, we have as I said, the one implementation already shows off the most possible, full featured version of that, which is pointing to a full endpoint.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I could take a tangent off of my tangent, this now makes me think of, let's say that I do have a distribution. We just had Open Social on last week. Something like that. A lot of times the modules are pre-packaged within the project. But if I understand Project Browser correctly, this is really about finding things that are not available to you now, but with a much nicer UI. So it makes me wonder, will there be alternative UIs, or maybe this is something that needs to happen in Contrib to turning on modules to make the module enabling experience much more user-friendly?
I just had a really interesting conversation with one of the devs on my team, Tristy, this morning, and she and I were talking about how now sitting alongside the Project Browser UI sits alongside the module list that comes with Drupal. And the module list looks kind of sad in comparison. And it's like, maybe we should also improve, when we have time, when we're done all these other things we're doing, we should maybe improve or unify those UIs in some way. Because right now, I think the biggest lacking, we do have an issue about this, is that Project Browser doesn't list core modules. So if you're looking for Layout Builder, you're not going to find it. And it's on by default now, as of like very recently, because Claro uses it. But previously, it wasn't on by default. And if you're looking for it, you're not going to find it. And so that's an additional thing, is we just need to think about, people might have submodules that they don't think of as submodules. They're just modules that aren't on already. And they might be trying to browse them in Project Browser. And we need to kind of incorporate those. It's an interesting problem.
Feels like future version of Project Browser would be not so much its own kind of tab and page in Drupal, but an enhancement to the module screen to allow you to see installed, uninstalled, downloadable sort of things, right?
Yep. And because of the routing system, we can do that from Contrib if we so choose. We can take over that page. It's really a race to see, will we be in core already by this point? When we can do anything, and it's really just a matter of prioritization.
It even makes me think of, like Leslie was talking about, designing logos for all of the projects. Will that be, something part that gets added to the Drupal packaging, scenario, where do I have to include my logo in my project file, et cetera, et cetera?
I mean,
seems
right
like
now,
a pretty big barrier, right?
Right now, it's funny. We just, any module can have multiple images attached to it. There's an image field. The first one, by weight, becomes your logo. And there's been talk about improving, Drupal.org to have a separate field for that, but we're really trying to not touch the D.O needs the infrastructure parts of it and work around that. But that's something that's on their roadmap for sure as they work towards a migration off of D7.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and Ryan, to speak to your distribution thought, Dries also mentioned in the keynote this year was about not putting distributions in Project Browser, but having the concept, and I forget Tim what he called it, but it's like starter kits or recipes, or it's more plug and play, where you can say, I want to add this type of functionality, and it'll pull in those modules that are needed to do something like that. So it's more like grouping of modules. Tim, do you remember what the term?
They keep changing it. I think it's currently the starter templates is what people are referring it to, and in code they're calling them recipes. But yeah, it's like the next phase. It's really honestly a revisit of the features module from way back. But sorry to mention the features module. But yeah, I mean, there's been some really interesting conversations about what does it mean to get code and config onto your site in 3 years? Like if we're all done, if all these sibling project initiatives all are finished, what does it actually look like together? And so there's a lot of collaboration needed, and there's a lot of power there. And that's why I'm glad we called it Project Browser and not Module Browser, so that we can do whatever we want when it comes time.
It's interesting. So this is a safe space, and we don't have to include this in the show if you don't want to. But I do remember from my my time at DrupalCon working with Project Browser. Chris Wells is the initiative lead, and he was bouncing around helping everybody, really approachable. But I wanted to ask you guys, and again, we'll cut this out of the show, so don't worry.
Sure.
How is Chris Wells to work with as an initiative lead?
Well, I'll take the pressure off you, Leslie, because I know you know Chris very well. I only met Chris through this initiative, and
really?
I will say, yeah, no, we've never met in person. I mean, it's been COVID this whole time, so I haven't had the chance. And I've been involved with a lot of initiatives, and I've led initiatives myself. I think Chris embodies, and this goes for you too, Leslie, but that wasn't the question. He's very good at seeking input and then making a decision. He's very empathetic and cares a lot about the user, but also cares a lot about the contributor, and makes people feel valued, and also makes sure to amplify a contribution to make it actually deliver value to people. So,
Right. And I'm fortunate to work with Chris at Redfin Solutions on a daily basis, so I have that. But Chris there and with Project Browser is a great teacher. Loves helping people learn how to contribute. As John said, at the different contribution events that we've had around Project Browser, he'll sit there all day in the contribution room and just help folks through the process, make them feel like they're really contributing, so they want to continue contributing. So I think that's his value. He has a technical background, so he can interface with Tim and with Ted Bowman and with all the folks that are, making great progress on the technical side of Project Browser. Chris is really good at understanding what's going on. He picked, Svelte, learned that, is a huge Svelte advocate right now. So yeah, Chris is great to work with.
And of course, I'm kidding. Chris is amazing, and sounds like a great initiative lead. On that topic, though, Tim, since you've been an initiative lead for other initiatives, right? What would you say, like, a makeup of a good initiative lead is? Not to derail us completely, but if somebody were like, "Hey, you know what? I want to be a Drupal initiative lead. How do I go about doing that?"
I mean, the biggest thing is, I think, vision, or at least having a source for that vision. You don't need to think of the idea yourself, but you need to have a persona in mind, or an audience. And I think everything starts with that. Like, Layout Builder started because I was having dinner with my friend who maintained a website for his volunteer thing, and was just complaining about how hard it was to move an image from one side of the page to the other. And that discussion ended up becoming Layout Builder. And I became very passionate about it just because of my buddy Steve. And I was like, what would Steve need when I get to this point? And so this was started with a persona in mind. Dries and Leslie, that's why your side is so, like, the heart and most important part of all this work, is because we have a strong persona. And so if you are a person that believes in, identifies a problem and can identify what someone would need for it to change, that's your starting point. The rest is just being able to talk to people and hype people up and get them excited about things, and keep track of a lot of different things happening at once.
I'd like to take a moment to thank your buddy Steve, because Layout Builder's awesome, and I'm glad that you had dinner with him that night.
Yeah, thanks very much. Also, I'm curious, Leslie, I think you mentioned a couple times, ways to get involved. But are there specific places that we should send people, like a Slack room, or particular, like, time of day that activities happen around Project Browser?
Sure, absolutely. So we meet twice a week, actually, Project Browser. The Site Builder Subcommittee meets on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So I lead that meeting. It's an asynchronous meeting. It's on the Project Browser channel in Drupal Slack. We'll put links to these resources in the show notes. And then on Wednesday, there's a meeting that Chris runs at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, which is a little bit more, not really focused as much on the user experience and on testing and on, getting input from folks that are, maybe looking at Project Browser for the first time, but it's more on talking about, the different components, the different technical questions. Should we include, should we stick with Svelte, things of that nature. So we have those 2 calls. People are free, can join either of those. But then there's a lot of other things. There's a Kanban board right now that we're using in terms of the content. So we looked at the top 100 most popular modules that are returned currently from the project browser, and we're working on updating the logos, as I said, the short descriptions in the categories. So there are tickets. There's a meta ticket, which is just like a parent ticket for each one of the top 100 modules. And then there are 3 child issues, one for the logo, one for the short description, and one for the categories. And then folks can just, if you're a designer, you just go to the Kanban board and you look for either needs work, find something that needs a logo. And then if you want to just review things, you just go to the needs review column on the Kanban board and you say, okay, I'm interested in the categories. Let me go see what tickets are sitting there waiting to be reviewed for the categories. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I still need to make some more tickets for that top 100. We don't have them all there yet, but we've made great progress on that. So anybody can hop in there, ask any, hop in the Kanban board, select what they want to work on, but they can also go to the Slack channel, as I mentioned, the project browser Slack channel, and ask any questions. Tim can speak a little bit more from, I don't want to say more technical, but more from the developer side in terms of, how to get involved with what they're working on.
Yeah, so in the same vein, we also use the Kanban board. Shout out to Matt Glayman, contribkanban.com.
Yep.
Which makes, it's an extra UI on top of Drupal.org that's been really helpful for us. We actually just emptied our board out by finishing everything that was required for the beta release. So we need to kind of repopulate that for a new release. So we don't have a link at the moment because we did too much work, too successful. There are a lot of issues. I think it's really just that people are starting to actually test it. So just the regular project browser issue queue is the place to dump issues and look for things. There's also as part of when you install project browser at the top of each page, it has a link in the module to the issue queue and saying this is still very development. We would love it if you give us some feedback. So we've gotten some really great feedback, about some of the iconography and, it's just some text being hard to understand and whatnot. And so the more feedback, the better.
Right. And coming up, Drupal Camp Colorado is happening on August 6th and 7th. There will be a contribution event there that folks can join, and also DrupalCon Prague coming up in September. There'll be a lot of contribution there. Chris and I try to give a session at as many camps and cons, and Tim as well, about Project Browser to get folks knowing what Project Browser is, how they can get involved, and then we try to have tables at any contribution events so that we can hands-on help folks that want to. And we have a lot of brand new contributors because there are tickets, there are issues that anybody can tackle. So whether you're the most experienced developer or somebody who's never really looked at Drupal at all, there's something for you to help with.
Very cool. How about translations? If you've reached a beta stage, are your strings more or less stable?
So the UI text is translated. Is marked, for Drupal T.
Right.
So it will be translatable when the translators add those translations. The larger problem, Drupal.org is not multilingual. Project pages are not. They are written in whatever language they're written in, and it's usually American English. We have unless Drupal.org has plans to make translations available for those things, we can't do that for them. So the project content will always be displayed in its canonical form. So, but the UI itself is already compatible.
That sounds like an interesting problem to solve if you have some of those plugins that can do multiple endpoints. Like, maybe it's just for the top 100 modules or something like that.
You could write your own that just links to CTools and translates Chaos Tools Suite into whatever language you choose. You could do that, your own facade for this, but the data itself is definitely, we are displaying the data that's given to us.
Well, Leslie and Tim, thank you for joining us. This has been an extremely enlightening show. We'd love to have you guys back to talk about other topics as well. And thank you for sharing your passion for Project Browser.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal or via email at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel. If you're interested in show news, upcoming Drupal camps, local meetups, and Chad's Book Corner, sign up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
Thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and hitting that big button in the sidebar that says Become a Patron.
And Leslie, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
Leslie G, LESLIEG on Drupal Slack. It's probably the best way, or on Drupal.org.
And Tim, if our listeners want to get in touch with you?
So Tim Plunkett on Slack and Drupal and everywhere. Some of them have dots, some don't, but Twitter does not. So there you go.
And Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I go by Liberator without the last vowel pretty much everywhere. And, at FFW making websites.
How about you, John?
You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And if you are in the market for a new job, you can look at epam.com/careers.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. Have a good one, everyone.
See you guys next week.